Srimati Bhaktivedanta Samanita Ramane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Navasesha Sunyavadi Pasatya Desatarne Om Aginatamilandasya Jala Jana Salakaya Tsaksis Militan Jaina Tasma Sri Gurave Namah Sri Caitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sa Pandantika Mansakopa Cha Kripas Nuvaye Vasa Patitram Pabhine Bhyo Vaishnave Bhyo Namo Namah. So Rupa Goswami was asked by Mahaprabhu in the presence of Subdamodar, in the presence of Ramananda Roy, and in the presence of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, three so qualified individuals, to recite the verse from his drama upon being heard makes all people's unhappiness and lamentation go away. So that's quite a introduction that Mahaprabhu is saying to Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami didn't want to say the verse in front of all these great people. He was quite shy. But Mahaprabhu persisted again and again. Bada Bada Prabhu Jaditara Agya Dila. He ordered him again and again. He gave him that order. And Rupa Goswami, he had to recite the verse. Tunde tunda vani vitim vitanoite tunda vali labdhaye karnakoda kadambani gatayate karno budhe bhyo shriham chaita pragana sangani vijayate savendriyanam kritam no jane janita kiyadbir amritai krishniti vana dvayi. So this verse is about the holy names and how it enacts, and it enacts with three parts of our body, as we have heard already. First, the tongue. Amrita Krishna Tivani, the two syllables, Krishna. What happens when it's in the mouth? It dances in the mouth and it expands. And this is the main point, in one sense, of the verse, is that that the holy names, if one is chanting properly, it's expanding its influence continuously. So after So after it expands in the tongue, so much so that one tongue doesn't seem sufficient. Damrapu, could you get me a little water? One tongue doesn't seem sufficient. One wants hundreds of tongues. Or many, many mouths. And then after that, because it's coming from the tongue, then it goes into the ear. And then when it goes into the ear, so one hears it, because sometimes, of course, there's the mechanical part of the ear. But if one follows the third part too, allows it into the mind through the ear, because it's possible to mechanically, not even mechanically, but speak it with the tongue, but not really hear it in such a way, the holy name, so it goes into the mind. Because one could be so distracted, and that's the nature of Kali Yuga. Everyone is so distracted. Upadrutaha, prenaya, mandasumanda matyo manda abhagya upadruta. It's a tendency of Kali Yuga. So when it enters the ear, or one could almost say, if it enters the ear after being vibrated in the mouth, one wants millions and millions of years. And then, if it enters the ear properly, after being vibrated from the tongue, then when it enters the consciousness, it just expands and expands. And it conquers, it dances, the way that Rupa Goswami describes it, it's so sweet. It dances in the heart, and he compares the heart to a courtyard. And it dances in the heart, and it conquers the activities of the mind. It completely controls the mind by its sweetness. And the result of that is that it expands its influence over the whole body, and the senses become inert, unable to move. They all become so influenced by the sweet holy names. So, what do you think of that? This is real chanting.
It's different. It's so exciting to hear it.
Yeah.
Definitely a different experience.
Yeah.
But it's a kind of, I feel like when we read these kind of things, it's like it's a target. We set a target in our life. If we can experience this.
If we experience it once, it's like Vrindavan. We hear so many descriptions of Vrindavan. We hear so many descriptions of the deities. We hear so many descriptions of the power of association of devotees. We hear so many descriptions of the power of the Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Caritamrita, that you can actually experience the Lord. So there's 2 points. One is we need hope. And if we don't have hope, then we can't go on. But the other point is by mercy, every now and then we can touch these things. And the touch of those things not only gives us hope, but gives us faith of the reality of their existence. And that gives us the ability and the desire to want more and more and more. So in one sense, it's very similar to what it's saying here. The nature it is of these, the holy names and these Panchanga Bhakti items especially, is to expand. And you want to experience it more and more and more. That's what it means, that I want hundreds of tongues or millions of years. I want more and more of this experience. Because the material experience of so many names and forms and things that we hear and things that we that dance in the courtyard of our heart, they don't give us any happiness. And the more we want to fill our ears and eyes and tongues and heart and consciousness with those things, the more miserable we become. So this is just the opposite. But to have that desire, or put it a little bit differently, to have that taste, that yes, I want this, that's Bhakti Lata Bija. And it's just a matter of time before we actually have it. The time may be short, time may be long, but we can experience, like when the lights go off, we experience there's a different illumination than when they're on. There's difference between day and night, but there's a difference between the taste, the fragrance of Krishna, of the holy names of Vrindavan, than the material tastes and fragrances. So if we expand that, how fortunate we are.
One thing, I'm just asking a question. How to be sure that this is true?
This is an honest question. So one answer, or you can almost say the proper answer for those who are very pious and from the culture and are simple-hearted is Shastra says. But in Kali Yuga, and I remember, you may have heard me say this before, like Prabhupada is in the United States. He's in New York City. He's speaking in 1966. And he's trying to explain some concepts to Westerners. concepts that they're not at all familiar with. And this is the difficulty that people born in one culture, the Indian culture, have very often dealing with Westerners. There's just different concepts, something that you're born with in India. There's Krishna, there's the Bhagavad Gita, there's sadhu, there's holy trees, there's holy rivers, there's even Brahman, Soham, or whatever. But there's certain concepts that you're born with. Just when you just take birth here, you're born with. But in the West, they just have, it's blank. So Prabhupada is speaking, and he tells the people, 1966, that Krishna has a body, but it's eternal. Because people have a very abstract and vague understanding of God. So he's trying to explain that God, the Supreme Absolute Truth, is a person. So person means, and he has a form, but it's a different kind of form than we have. So without explaining any of this, what I just said, he says that you'll never see a picture of Krishna as an old man. And then Hare Krishna. Thank you. So then, and then he's speaking to a group. Good ringtone. Was it easier for you to sit up? You sit. Do what's coming. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So then after he says that, have you ever seen a picture of Krishna? You'll never see a picture of Krishna as an old man. And then there's a long pause. And then he says, have any of you ever seen a picture of Krishna? So this is what he was dealing with. The concept isn't there. So how are you going to establish Shastric authority, the authority of Bhagavad Gita, that it is absolute, it is true, with people who have never even seen a picture of Krishna, never even heard of Krishna, never met anyone who was a vegetarian in their whole lives? How do you do that? And that's the miracle that Prabhupada did, or part of the miracle that he did. He put the whole concept in people's consciousness. So you didn't hear the question that Vinod Prabhu asked, but it was, how do you really know it's true? He was asking for the benefit of others. How do you really know? We were reading from Chaitanya Caritamrita about the holy names. So Srila Rupa Goswami had written a verse, and Mahaprabhu heard this verse, and Thakur Haridas heard this verse, Tunda Tadambani. You know that verse? Glorifying the holy names. So, and he said, this verse makes all lamentation go away. So we read that, and then he forced Rupa Goswami to recite this verse, because Rupa Goswami he was shy to recite his own writing in front of very learned scholars, such as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Ramananda Roy, and Srup Damodar. But Mahaprabhu, he ordered him, he didn't ask him to recite it. Agyadila, he ordered him to recite it. So he recited it, and this verse describes the reaction of the chanting of Krishna's holy names. First, as it goes into the mouth. There's three things that it goes into. First, the mouth, and the tongue vibrates these two syllables. And then it causes the desire to taste so much, to taste it again and again, so much more, that one desires hundreds of tongues, millions of tongues. And then when it enters the ear, one desires that the joy that it produces causes one to desire to taste it more and more and more. So therefore one desires, how much can I taste with 2 ears? So I desire to taste, I need hundreds of ears, I need millions of ears. So when the vibration comes from the mouth and then enters the ear, and then it enters the courtyard of the heart, which is, there's so many things that could be said about that, why he says the courtyard, because there's always something in the courtyard. So what's in the courtyard of the heart? It's the soul itself and ultimately Krishna. But so he says, then it dances. The holy name dances in the courtyard of the heart, and the result of that is that the heart means the Chaitanya, the mind, the consciousness. Then the whole body becomes inert. All the senses become so absorbed in the holy name dancing in the heart, in that experience, that all the senses stop operating due to the envelopment in the sweetness of the holy names. Prabhu, Dhammadaktis, could you close the door? Because we don't want to attract too many other living entities. So then the question came, so we talked about it a little bit in answer to the question, and it seems, first of all, that especially with the holy names, with the elements of Panchanga Bhakti, with the holy names, with the deities, with Vrindavan, with the Bhagavatam, and with the association of devotees, that sometimes, somehow, and it's quite beyond our control, but somehow some little taste in one of these things occurs. Some taste that may be hope, that may be just an experience of a different fragrance, a different substance that's non-material. So, we could go almost around the room, and if the room was filled with 100 people, and you could ask the devotees, what makes you continue? What have you tasted? What do you want? Is it the philosophy? Or is it a taste? And usually there's something that gives one some faith that one's tasted or experienced that's just different, of a different substance than our material experiences. There's something. We stand in front of the deities. We stand in front of the deities. We go to Giriraj Govardhan. Have you been to our place over there, very, very close, and sat there?
Yeah, but he's asking, like, you have been to the spot?
We go very, very close sometimes. Sometimes I bring some devotees there. This is one of the happiest things, the things that brings me the most happiness. I bring some devotees. Last year I brought devotees from Iran they were chanting amazingly enough. They're all from a Muslim heritage. And I brought groups who passed through here. And yogis from Washington, D.C., practitioners of yoga. Or brought some IIT students, or yogis from, with all tattoos on them or whatever, and, from the West. And, people who practice yoga, and we just sit there by Giriraj, and it's just different. And there's some sweetness of experience that is just different from what anyone has ever experienced before. So that little experience of either from the holy names or from the Dham or from association with devotees or from the Bhagavatam, associating with Krishna through the Bhagavatam, or the deities. Some people who don't know anything about Krishna, who are from a Western culture, who have no concept that the deity form is divine, but they stand in front of the deity and they know it's different, and it's something that has a sweetness. It gives them a taste that's different. So this is this is bhakti entering the heart in perhaps a little form, seed form, that makes us, almost like the verse that we read, want to taste more and more and more of that. And that's, in one sense, the challenge of being a devotee. When you first join the Krishna consciousness movement, there's something that impels you. There's something that you want. You've tasted it, and you sort of expect that taste to just blossom and blossom and blossom and grow, and that's almost the promise in one sense. But it doesn't always happen. So the question was, how do you know it was real? First of all, it wasn't just something you imagined. But another question is, how do you make it blossom? And that's the question that we actually want answered. How do we learn to develop our relationship with Krishna, with the spiritual dimension, with Goloka Vrindavan in such a way that we can't live without it for a moment, that it's so sweet. I remember speaking to devotees when I was in Melbourne, because the deities in Melbourne are very, very beautiful. Radha Ballava, and then there's big Gaurnitai, and then there's Jagannath Baldev Subhadra. So we see devotees coming in, and they go in front of the deities, and they pray, and there's a different atmosphere there. And then after a while, they offer the obeisances, they take charanamrita, then they walk out and take prasadam, and by the time they take prasadam, they've forgotten everything. They're in a different atmosphere again. But you keep going back to that atmosphere, and then you leave it. And the atmosphere is very much one of consciousness. And you go back in, and then you leave it, and then it comes times when you decide, I'd much rather be in this atmosphere than this mundane material atmosphere that has all promise but doesn't really deliver the happiness that I of the sensual happiness that I had hoped. So the question is, how do you know it's real? So how we began this conversation that turned very long into telling the story of how Prabhupada, somehow or another, amazingly enough, by his association, he couldn't give the people the answer that we usually give people. How do you know it's real? And the answer we usually give people is because the Bhagavad Gita says so, the Shastra says so. Because these people Prabhupada was talking to in 1966 in New York City, they had never even seen a picture of Krishna, what to speak of except the authority of Krishna, or accept his words as perfect. So how, if you'd never even seen a picture of Krishna, you never even heard the name of Krishna, how are you going to accept the Bhagavad Gita? So how did he do it? So it was very much, his secret was, first of all, the holy names, prasadam. The secret was him, actually. His personal association. He carried with him a sweetness that everyone wanted more and more of. And according to your capacity, you tasted it. If you just got a little drop of the taste of something from that other realm, then you wanted it. You may walk out and forget all about it, but then it's yours. Because it's like when you leave Vrindavan, the wonderful thing about when you're living in Vrindavan and going to Delhi is when you come back, you say, oh yes, there's a special energy here, this special sweetness. So then again, the same question, how do you know it's real? Is it just imagination? And First of all, you can't doubt it, because if you doubt, you're just imagining it, then how do you know anything is real? You're just doubting your very self, your self-understanding about how do you know anything is real? You know what I mean? Yeah, you understand what I mean? How do you know anything is real? At some point you have to trust your experience and your intelligence, etc. At some point you have to trust, otherwise you go crazy, if nothing else. So if this isn't real, then how do I know that my hand is my hand? How do I know that the light is light? How do I know that anything exists? How do I know I exist even if I don't trust myself to know that I exist? So at some point, this is how I deal with those kind of questions. At some point, you have to trust yourself. Like the impersonalists, the Mayavadis say that everything is what? What's their answer to the... because they want to be spiritualists, they see spiritualism. And what is the Mayavad philosophy in essence? What is the Mayavad philosophy? Yeah.
They say everything is Maya. Everything is Maya.
Okay, they say Krishna is Maya, but they say, different from the Sunyavadis, they say that everything is the Supreme. Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasi. But then there's a problem, that we don't know we're supreme. We are supreme, but do you think you're supreme? Do you think you're everything? Do you know everything? No. So then they have to say our experience, we are supreme, but we've forgotten. So of course there's a philosophical problem there. How can the Supreme forget? How can he be covered by Maya? But aside from that, but then they have to say that everything, you are supreme, and anything that doesn't seem to be you, tattvamasi, is illusion. So just imagine the way you have to think to be a Mayavadi, to think that nothing that you see exists. How are you? It's the most impractical, improbable, ridiculous philosophy. Nothing exists. So you can try it. So when it's time to leave this room, try to go out, imagining that the door doesn't exist. Just try, see what happens. If you're a Mayavadi, if you're not a Mayavadi, you just bang your head. So they say everything is illusion, because eventually you have to accept something about your experience of reality. That's the actual fault of Buddhism. One of the main faults of Buddhistic Sunyavadi is because they say nothing exists. But what are you using to perceive that nothing exists? Your mind. But if your mind is something, then it too doesn't exist. So you're using something that doesn't exist to prove that that this doesn't exist. So it's too crazy. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
How can you use your mind, which doesn't exist, the instrument doesn't exist, according to your philosophy, to show that the world is illusion? That doesn't make any sense at all. So anyway, that's my long answer to your very deep question. How do you know anything? Any questions or comments? Or else we'll continue reading.
I have a small question. Even after hearing so many classes from so many devotees, that offending devotees is a mad elephant offense, but still we end up offending devotees. So how to overcome that offensive mentality?
That reminds me of that story from Gandhi's autobiography, when the lady comes with her son. And she says, please instruct my son to eat so many sweets. You know that story? So he says, come back in a week, or 2 weeks, whatever it was. And then don't eat sweets. So she said, why did you wait 2 weeks to tell him not to eat sweets? What was his answer?
But please speak something more.
First, I had to stop eating sweets. That was his answer, yes. Another story I'll tell you. That Prabhupada, he said this about his son, was very active. And there was a fan going on in the room. Punk. So he wanted to keep touching it. This Prabhupada saying about his own son. And he kept on pulling his hand away and pulling his hand away. And he always wanted to touch it. So then one of his friends came. And he explained the problem. That his son kept on wanting to touch. And it's so dangerous. Little boy putting his finger in the fan. So he said, put the fan speed down very low and then let him touch it. And then he never did it again. So even when you think badly about anyone, what to speak of a devotee, it causes a tightening of the heart. If you're a little bit conscious, at least this is my experience, it doesn't feel good to say bad things about people. So, do you want to keep on experiencing that? Or do you want to experience the sweetness that comes from going in front of the deities, the sweetness that comes from chanting nicely, being absorbed, the sweetness that comes from, So at some point, we keep hearing it and hearing it and hearing it. At some point, you just say, I just don't want to do it anymore. You just be careful of what you're saying. Sometimes we do these things in innocence, and sometimes we do it in envy. And very often there's at least some envy in our heart when we say bad things about people. We don't wish them well, and that itself feels so bad when you think about it. Because as if everyone in the world goes down, that makes me feel happier. Is that going to make me happier? So if we're a little bit conscious and a little bit careful, and then maybe we just say no more. And I've seen this also with devotees. I've seen this in so many devotees now. They're very, very careful about, it never used to be there, but what they say about others. Very, very careful, and they'll say something sweet even. And then how do you point out something that's real when you're dealing practically? How do you point out something that has to be said when you're dealing practically, but not coming from a point of envy and critical? So that's, ask me again next week and I'll tell you. It's not easy, though. You have to make sure that your heart, I've heard this also from sadhus in Vrindavan about correcting people when it's, say if you're in a position of authority in a temple even or something, or where do you work?
I'm a surgeon. I work in Ajmer.
In Ajmer? Jaipur? Or?
Near Jaipur.
Yeah. So, so do you have, if you see one of the people in the operating theater and they're not acting properly, maybe not during the operation, but you have to tell them, no, you can't do that. So how do you practically do that without offending them or anything? And one of the ways that I heard was you wait until your heart has well wishes towards the person, there's some pretty or affection. So especially in dealing with devotees, sometimes it's our duty to point out something, like the father has to point out something for his children, but if the affection is there, then the effect won't be negative. What do you think?
It's useful. If we have some affection, then things will improve. We'll become a little gentle in our dealings.
Yeah.
And then we'll have less offensive mentality.
So how to have affection for those you really don't like, like the way it is, it's not easy. You have to be Uttama Bhakta or something. So we have. How do you have affection for those who have hurt you or you feel hurt with? So the Bhagavad, have to be answers. So many answers, but none of them make it easier to do it. That's the problem, as you're saying. We try our best and we learn. We touch the fan and we don't like it. Many years ago, I used to stay at an ISKCON farm, Gita Nagari in Pennsylvania, and just like they have fences there. Here we have the fences to keep the electric fences to keep the monkeys out. By the way, we saw them come in yesterday from in between. Yeah. So anyway, so they used to have these electric fences in the farm to make sure the cows don't go out of the pasture ground. And cows always want to go out of the pasture ground. It's the nature of cows. So the head farmer there, he used to see if the fence was alive, had electricity going through it, he would touch it, just like that. And there came a point when he said, I can't touch it anymore. I can't do it anymore. So sometimes, if our intelligence isn't strong enough in our habit, we have to learn that way, by touching it and getting burnt, and touching it and hurting, and touching until, finished. So, of course we can say, which way would you rather learn? but I have to wait a week before I say that, at least. We're not ruled by our intelligence very often. We're ruled by other parts of us. And that's why in the part of the Chaitanya Caritamrita we're reading, the first thing that Mahaprabhu did, because he's going to, in this chapter of Chaitanya Caritamrita, he's going to establish the authority of Rupa Goswami in writing dramas, because Rupa Goswami has written these two exalted, he was in the process of writing these two exalted dramas, the Vidagdha Madhava and Lalita Madhava. So the authority of Rupa Goswami is being expert in setting the standard for dramas, is being established. So the first thing Mahaprabhu did is he glorified Rupa Goswami in front of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was a great scholar, Ramananda Roy, who was a great scholar, and he wrote dramas that were famous, that were perfect. He was an authority, and Subdamara was so exalted. So he glorified Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami just said so many nice things about his writing. And the reason was he was testing them, parikshita. He was testing them because they're the ones who are going to judge Rupa Goswami. And when you're judging someone, you have to be free from envy of the person. Otherwise, you'll naturally find bad things to say about the person amidst an ocean of good. So they've just read this verse describing the holy names in front of these great persons. And their first reaction is Jata Bhakta Vrinda Aro Ramanandarai Sloka Shuni Shavara Hoila Ananda Vismaya. They were astonished and filled with bliss There was no envy in their hearts. When all the devotees of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, especially Sri Ramananda Roy, who was the expert in drama, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the scholar, heard this verse, they were all filled with transcendental bliss and were struck with wonder. And everyone admitted that although they had heard many statements glorifying the holy name of the Lord, they had never heard such sweet descriptions as those written by Srila Rupa Goswami. So their hearts were full of admiration. Rupa Goswami was so humble. And Ramananda replied, now they're going to start talking about what he's actually writing. What kind of drama are you writing? We can understand that it is a mine of Siddhanta, of conclusive statements. It must be, because you've written it. So it must be a great source. How do you say mine in Hindi? M-I-N-E?
Mine?
M-I-N-E, meaning a place where like gold comes from a gold mine. Diamonds. Yeah. So this of Siddhantic truths, he says, if you've written it, we can understand. Immediately they've recognized Rupa Goswami's position from two verses that he wrote. And Srup Damodar replied for Rupa Goswami. He was so humble that he didn't want to answer about his own, he didn't want to speak about his own writing at all. So Srup Damodar replied for Rupa Goswami. He wanted to compose a drama about the pastimes of Lord Krishna. He planned to describe in one book both the pastimes of Vrindavan and those of Dwarka and Mathura. He began it in that way, but now, following the order of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he has divided it in two and is writing two plays, two dramas, one concerning the pastimes of Mathura and Dwarka, and the other concerning the pastimes of Vrindavan. The two plays, the two dramas, are Vidagdha Madhava and Lalita Madhava, and both of them wonderfully describe ecstatic emotional love of God. So the words Dui Natake, these Prema Rasa Adbhuta Sabha, they both describe Prema Rasa, the Adbhuta, the wonderful, the inconceivably wonderful Prema Rasa, the relationship with Krishna, both in Vrindavan and Dwarka. And now Prema Rasa is completely above the material world. There's the love of this world, which is, of course, has selfishness attached to it. It's not true love. And then there's Prema Bhakti, which is something alokika. It is out of this world. Now, how are you going to describe something that doesn't occur in this material world using words that are in the material world? This question is, how do you use words of the material world to describe things that are outside the world without people just getting material concepts through the material words? So one actually has to be empowered to do that. That's this question was actually asked later in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, in the 87th chapter, about the prayers of the personified Vedas. This was the question that was asked. How is it possible for words that come from the material level to describe the transcendental platform? And the answer given that was not easy to understand, but it was that those words have to be empowered by Krishna. Krishna's potency has to enter into those words. So Rupa Goswami is going to do that through in these two books, because he's empowered by Mahaprabhu. And this has already been discussed. He's gotten the Shakti. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given him the ability, and he was a suitable receptacle think the Sanskrit word is patra, for the potency of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to enter into him, and for him to use that potency with full purity to describe the transcendental realm. So when Rupa Goswami is famous in Sanskrit literature, especially for his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Nataka Chandrika. And so even, and also Kavi Kanapur and Krishnadas Kaviraj, they're famous in the academic realm for their abilities in kavya, in writing poetry and etc. But just writing poetry and having those expertises to do what they did is insufficient to do what Rupa Goswami actually did. He actually opens up the spiritual world to the consciousness, through his words, to the consciousness of those who are qualified with the proper purity to enter in. So they wonderfully describe Prema Rasa Adbhuta Sava. They wonderfully describe ecstatic emotional love of God. That's how and how are you going to translate the words Prema Rasa Adbhuta Sava? How are you going to translate the words of Prema Rasa into English even?
Divine nectar of love.
Yes, so what does that mean? I'm saying that to translate these things or put them into words in such a way that they touch the hearts of people and give them some kind of an experience, a hint or experience what the spiritual realm is like. This isn't easy. So what did you say? You said divine. So if all our ideas, what is divine? So one part of divine means, it's coming from God. It's on the level of God, and it's transcendental. But if all your experiences are mundane, when someone says transcendental, what does it mean to you? It means that it has nothing to do with your experiences. So then you end up with nothing again. So it's very writing transcendental literatures. That's what Kaviraj Goswami at one point he says, I'm now going to explain things that shouldn't be spoken of. But I'm confident that those who are qualified to hear them will get the experience that I'm describing. And those who are not competent to understand it, they won't get it at all. So therefore I don't care if they don't get it. They won't understand what I'm talking about. So it's like that, especially with the holy names. But then you get a place like Vrindavan. Have you been to Vrindavan many times?
2-3 times.
Yourself?
Yes.
Many times?
50-20.
Wow. When did you start coming to Vrindavan?
In total I have 10 since my childhood.
Okay.
I stayed in Faridabad nearby, so
Okay.
many times came to my parents. There are many yatras also.
Yeah. So Faridabad is near Braj,
Yes.
so it has something. But do you experience when you come to Govardhan or something like that, or come to Vrindavan? Of course, now Vrindavan is, you experience mostly horns and traffic, but inside the Krishna Balaram Mandir, for example, does that feel like the Faridabad streets, or is it something different?
It's totally different.
Totally different. So, and that's why you keep coming back.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's why you start staying here.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Of course, no one will say anything other than that now.
But one thing I feel is like
Yeah.
by staying in Braj is a different, not only the experience, but a different life in a way of not to take it, not to start taking it ordinary. Like, one has to feed his mind every single day that you're in Braj. I feel that those, or not like what you said, like on that scale, but I feel that those who are living far away, they are sometimes more fortunate than us because at least they remember Vrindavan in a way of distance, like, we have to go Vrindavan. So the hankering which they have, maybe we don't have. That's the thing over here, because we start taking it after a time.
For granted, yeah. This is where I do my ordinary.
Yeah, this is like, it becomes our regular. So we are on we're walking on a two-side sword, it's both sides. So this idea has to feed every single day, every morning after waking up. You're in Braj, you have to do this, you have to accept it. So, and
What do you have to accept?
that it's Braj and it's not ordinary.
Okay, but what does that mean? That it's
That means it's like, one has to be serious in his life, by staying, it's not to take it in that way. One has to be serious in his own practice.
so in your sadhana that it affects you to do your sadhana.
Otherwise, what's the point of staying here? If we just start doing the same.
One other thing that you should glorify Krishna here. That's what it's for.
But to whom?
Huh? I mean, I see people walk around Giriraj and they don't care to whom, they just sing. but what I saw, it hit me one time that, because I've lived in the different parts of the world. I've lived in Australia, I've lived in the United States, I've lived in Hong Kong, China. At least those in Europe I've visited. But once you're in Vrindavan, it's like Vrindavan seems alive and it reciprocates with you. And these other places, they're like dead energy. So the point that I wanted is that that Krishna is going to reciprocate with you here. Now, how he reciprocates with you is up to him, in one sense. But if you do your part and glorify Krishna, and that's our inspiration at the retreat center here, is that we notice that if Krishna is glorified here, Giriraj is happy, and then there's some mercy flows. So that's our inspiration for this place, so that the devotees can get mercy from Giriraj, who is very, very kind. But I see that when you say that, remind yourself, but it's what happens here I don't find ordinary. Just things happen in an extraordinary way. And then you can ask, how do you know I'm not just imagining it? And I also ask, but too many times it happens. You think this can't be a coincidence. What do you think? What do you think of all this talk?
Whatever opportunity we get, we should try to glorify Krishna. Okay. Whatever little opportunity we get in our daily day-to-day life.
Where do you live usually?
In Bhopal, in Madhya Pradesh.
Okay. So Bhopal, Ajmer, and Faridabad. So you've come from Madhya Pradesh?
Yes.
Yeah. In Bhopal. Do you know, I think Samagrisi Prabhu do you know him?
Sorry.
Samagrisi, one devotee who was a doctor in the United States. I think he started preaching there. How did you become interested in Krishna consciousness?
Ahir's Nandadulal Prabhuji, he used to come to our MBBS college in Mumbai.
Okay.
We all have studied in Mumbai.
Okay.
So from there, we got connected.
So you're all friends?
Yeah. Well, some are senior, some are junior, not same batch.
Yeah.
But we are connected almost, I think, 7, 8, 10 years almost. More than that.
So yeah. I have to end now though, or soon, or 5 minutes or something. But the next verse, because they ask him, Ramananda Roy says, please recite the Nandi Sloka, the introductory verse of the Vidagdha Madhava, so I can hear and examine it. Ramananda Roy said, but he didn't mean examine it in a negative way, but really what's happening is they want to establish Rupa Goswami's authority, so you need an expert to examine a person. And if the expert says that this person is expert, then we accept it. But if anyone just says, like if in the doctor, there are some doctors that are considered very, very, very expert. So if that doctor says, I really recommend this one, then everyone takes it very seriously. But if just some ordinary person says, it's not taken in the same way. So what's going on really, when he says he wants to examine it, he wants to examine it so he can certify how exalted Rupa Goswami's writing is. So there's the next verse. I'll just read it, just so that I'll read the. I wouldn't be able to read the Sanskrit properly, but you can see just by looking at it, it's beautiful. I'll just read the English so it gives us something to think about. This is the introduction to Vidagdha Madhava. May the pastimes of Sri Krishna reduce the miseries existing in the material world and nullify, remove all unwanted desires. What a mood of compassionate mood. The pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are like sikarini, a blend of yogurt and sugar candy. They overpower the pride of even the nectar produced on the moon, for they distribute the sweet fragrance of the concentrated loving affairs of Srimati Radharani and the gopis. So on one hand, removal of everything negative, and on the other hand, the distribution, the pastimes of Krishna distribute the sweet fragrance of the concentrated loving affairs of Srimati Radharani and the gopis. It is better than Amrita. Yeah. So it reduces misery, removes misery, and not only misery, removes unwanted desires, and also it distributes sweetness that's incomparable. So that's the introduction. So does that make you want to read more and hear more of it? So what a great introduction, because that's the purpose. Because the nature of a book is that you read the first, at any time you can go. So they say that the most important line of a book is the first. Because if you don't like the first line, you'll close the book and you won't even read the second line. So this is the introduction, the Nandi Sloka is considered so important. Okay, we should end. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So are you going to...